This is the Bible Book Club. I'm Heather.
And I'm Susan.
And we're in the book of 1 Kings. Welcome to the club. Last time in chapters 16 and 17, Omri, the former commander of Israel's army, killed Zimri and began a 12-year reign. Omri was succeeded by his son Ahab. Ahab reigned for 22 years and did even more evil than Omri. He had help from his wife Jezebel, who was an influencer for Baal. God responded to Israel's evil by sending a powerful prophet named Elijah. Elijah warned Ahab that because of their evil ways, there would be a drought in the land. Jezebel was a killer queen, so to keep Elijah safe, the Lord provided him with food and a hiding place far away. First, he hid by a brook where the ravens fed him, then in the home of a widow from Zarephath. While staying with the widow, her son became ill and died. Elijah, the power prophet, prayed, and the boy was then brought back to life. Elijah is the first of only 4 others in the Bible to repeat the miracle of raising someone from the dead.
Okay, so before we get into this week's episode, I'm going to talk about the importance of the Omri dynasty. We've touched on it a little. The Omri dynasty is considered the greatest of the northern kingdom of Israel in all their history. The dynasty included Omri's son Ahab and 2 grandsons, and it lasted almost 50 years, well into the book of 2 Kings. Now, Omri was a self-made king who left a legacy infamous for its evil. He didn't inherit the kingship, in other words. The Bible does not record the power and prosperity of the house of Omri, but others did. In fact, the Assyrian records referred to the nation of Israel as the house of Omri long after he had died. So Omri began the policies in the northern kingdom of Israel that brought wealth, military strength, and international fame. But much of Omri's material success came at a high spiritual price. He created a rich alliance with the Phoenicians by marrying his son Ahab to Jezebel, the king of Tyre's daughter. Now recall that the former kings of Tyre had helped David build the palace in 2 Samuel and helped make Solomon rich in 1 Kings chapters 5, 7, and 9. So they weren't all bad guys. They were helpful at times. But this current king of Tyre's daughter, Jezebel, married Omri's son Ahab. Now Ahab and Jezebel led all of Israel into idolatry and more evil than ever before. And that's where we start today's episode. God is going to deal with the idolatry. Scene 1, Elijah recruits Obadiah. In our last episode, Elijah warned,
"As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word."
In this chapter, we will learn that the drought has become dire. It is the 3rd year of no rain and no harvest during a time period without preservatives, so food has become scarce. This is a really bad look for Jezebel's god Baal. Recall that Baal was supposed to be the god of fertility and weather, and not just any weather, but rainstorms in particular.
1 Kings chapter 18. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now, the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals." So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another.
Okay, so the Lord sends Elijah to Ahab, the evil king of Israel, and Elijah begins his journey. Meanwhile, Ahab summons Obadiah, his palace administrator, who happens to be a man of faith. He must be a secret man of faith. Now remember, Obadiah saved 100 prophets from Ahab's wife, Jezebel. And note that despite Ahab's evil idolatry, God has providentially placed Obadiah, a man of God, as Ahab's palace administrator. How Obadiah escaped Jezebel's notice is a mystery. Ahab providentially commands Obadiah to go looking for any remnant of grass to feed the livestock.
Verse 7. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," he replied. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here."
Providentially, Obadiah runs right into Elijah, and Elijah tells him, "Hey, go back and inform Ahab that I am in town." But Obadiah argues about this request, and he has a good reason why.
Verse 9. "What have I done wrong?" asked Obadiah, "that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a kingdom or nation claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here.' I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, 'Elijah is here?' He will kill me." Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today."
Obadiah does not want to tell Ahab about Elijah because he thinks Elijah will disappear. Elijah has been very elusive despite Ahab's attempts to find him. Now, we know from our last episode that Elijah has been out of the country in Sidon, hiding out at the widow's house. Why was he hiding? Because ever since Elijah warned Ahab there would be a famine because of Israel's idolatry, he was a target. Ahab and Jezebel in particular want Elijah dead. Obadiah is concerned for his own life. If he tells Ahab that Elijah is here and Elijah disappears again, the evil Ahab will kill him. That's how bad Ahab was. Obadiah's response appears self-centered and weak, but think about it like this. Obadiah has been serving covertly in Ahab's house as an undercover agent. He works quietly behind the scenes. In fact, he has hidden and fed 100 prophets under Jezebel's very nose. His position is important as an insider. It is his MO to stay in the king's good graces, and he doesn't want to risk making the king angry. Elijah, on the other hand, has been serving overtly in opposition to the king. His MO is in direct contrast to Obadiah. Elijah is confrontationally public and accusatory. The point is that God uses different people and different tactics to attack evil. Elijah is overt and in the king's face, and Obadiah is covert underneath the king's nose. Elijah reassures Obadiah that he will show up and appear before King Ahab. Scene 2. Elijah confronts King Ahab.
1 Kings 18, starting in verse 16. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table."
This is where we see Elijah's little personality coming out. Elijah does not tolerate any trash talk from Ahab. He is not the troublemaker. This drought is on Ahab and his family. After denying that he is the problem, Elijah throws down the gauntlet. He wants a showdown, a battle for proof of power once and for all. Scene 3, the showdown between Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. This was really a battle between God and Baal, not Elijah and the 450. Elijah is just acting on behalf of God and the prophets on behalf of Baal. One God and one prophet against one God and 450 prophets. The odds look terrible for Elijah, and Israel is probably expecting a huge victory for their new god Baal. Or not. Perhaps after 3 years of no rain from their rain god Baal, the Israelites had begun to doubt. And now here was Elijah, the very one who had warned of the drought 3 years ago. Could it be he was right about God? Their eyes saw that the human odds were stacked against Elijah at 450 to 1. But their hearts were probably dropping with a little fear as they recalled that the God of Israel, the one who had defeated Pharaoh, parted the Red Sea, crumbled the walls of Jericho, cleared out the Canaanites, and filled the temple with his presence, was and always had been the one true God. Well, word traveled fast and the people gathered quickly. There was going to be a show, and one God was sure to go down.
Verse 20. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing.
Elijah's first challenge is to the people. They must choose God or Baal. But the people say nothing because maybe the people are conflicted. Following God was a lot harder and riskier than following Baal. There was political pressure from Ahab and Jezebel to follow Baal, and if they didn't, their life was at risk. There was cultural pressure to follow Baal, as he had been the god of the Canaanites long before Israel arrived, and the Israelites, they liked intermarrying with the Canaanites. And if all that didn't get them, there was a physical pleasure in following Baal because sexual rites were built into the liturgy. There were literally holy whores, male and female temple prostitutes, and it was a part of worship to schedule a fertility visit. When you think of how important it was to the Israelites to track their lineage in their tribes and how they inherited their land based on their family and their tribe, you can imagine how temple whores messed this up. Elijah was probably disgusted by their indecision. Like, really? You really can't make this choice? You're really gonna make me prove it. Great, let's do this. And Elijah lays out the rules of the battle between God and Baal.
Verse 22. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good."
So Elijah lays out the rules, and he's very accommodating. The Baal prophets get to go first. The Baal prophets get to pick the bull they want. The Baal prophets pretty much get everything they want. So the people answer this time. They like the rules for the showdown, thinking, okay, we might win this one. The showdown begins, and the 450 prophets step up to the plate.
Verse 25, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he's a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder, and they slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention.
Think about how this looked. Baal has every opportunity to win. He has the home team advantage, as it's thought that Mount Carmel was sacred to Baal. He has 450 prophets to 1. And Baal is the god of rain, and they're asking for rain. Well, they're asking for fire first, but the ultimate goal is rain. The 450 prophets proceed with a raucous dance. They prepare the bull for sacrifice. They call on the name of Baal from morning till noon, shouting and dancing around the altar they had made. I have said it before. I think God has an excellent sense of humor. And the angels, I think they love a good show. In my mind, the heavenly realm gets balcony seats to the greatest shows on earth. Now, God, of course, unlike the heavenly realm, always knows exactly what is going to happen in every situation. But the angels probably don't, and they probably make guesses like we do in movies in between popcorn and M&Ms. And in this show, the angels all want to know how God is going to use just one prophet, Elijah, to show up 450 prophets, because they already look like idiots. Now remember, this is just in my mind how I think that the Lord and the angels enjoy our earthly shenanigans, which that's what this show is. It is a joke, 450 to 1. And
Yeah, it's like a movie.
it's like a movie. Like, how is this guy going to win?
And the angels are loving it.
They're loving it. The show continues like this. Elijah is leaning up against a tree with his arms crossed, and the 450 decked out Baal dancers are starting to look frothy. Their dancing is becoming so frenzied. Now, the angels in the balcony seats are a chatty group, a bit too chatty. And God, the know-it-all, he really does know it all, leans over and says, "Shh, you're going to miss the best part. Elijah is about to get sassy." Just then, Elijah sarcastically tells 450 wildly dancing prophets to, "Hey, yell louder, guys. Maybe Baal's sleeping." Or, as some commentators interpret it, Baal has gone aside, which means on a potty break. He's literally insulting their God. Now, the angels, of course, erupt in laughter about this potty break joke. There's lots of potty humor in the Bible, I find. But they also love Elijah, especially when he's mocking. Finally, after a lot of blood, literally blood, sweat, and noise from the 450, they're whipped. Baal is a zero, a no-show, a nothing. God leans back in his seat, smile on his face. The angels, they lean forward. Their eyes are now focused on Elijah because they know there's more coming.
Verse 30, Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." And they come to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 sheaves of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench.
So the real show begins where Israel began way back in history with the 12 tribes. The angels are ecstatic about this because they love history, and Elijah is going back to their roots. He draws the people in closer. He rebuilds the Lord's altar with 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 sons of Jacob. It's like he's visually rebuilding their faith in front of them, reminding them of where they came from. Now, this would have smarted a little because remember, we're in the northern kingdom of only 10 tribes. So, ouch, they're missing 2. And the tribe that counts the most, Judah, is not where they are. Judah, the tribe from which the line of David is passed, is in the southern kingdom. And next, Elijah kicks the competition between God and Baal up a notch. He builds a trench around the altar. Now remember, the other altar did not have that. The Baal prophets did not build a trench around their altar. He prepares the bull and places it on the altar, which they did that too. Then he tells the people to pour water over the offering 3 times. So the offering that's supposed to burn up in fire is now soaked and surrounded by a trench full of water.
And so is all the wood that's under it.
Everything is
kind of hard to get on fire when it's all wet.
Elijah is kicking it up a notch. He's making it 10 times harder for God to, light it all up.
Show up.
Then, all alone, Elijah prays. No dancing, no shouting, no cutting himself till blood drips everywhere. He simply prayed.
Verse 36. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench.
In seconds, it was all gone. The fire consumed the sacrifice, the wood, and even the water and the stones. The one true God is the only one who showed up, and in a way that no one watching could deny, with all the odds against him. God burned up the sacrifice just as he had so many times before in their history.
Verse 39, when all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God.
Seeing is believing. But not everyone gets to see like the Israelites did that day. In fact, in the New Testament, the Apostle Thomas did not get to see what he wanted. And this is what Jesus told him.
John 20, starting in verse 24. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But Thomas said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
Psst, that's you.
That's us. It's not easy. And that is why this book, the Bible, is so vital to us. Just as the fire was proof to the Israelites, this book is proof to us. There is but one true God. This book is our miracle of proof. We need to read it, understand it, and believe. It's the #1 selling book of all time for a reason, so that you may believe. We also have one who testifies to the truth of what we read in the Bible, and that's the Holy Spirit. The Apostle Paul explains it like this.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, starting in verse 9, however, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him, these are the things God has revealed to us by his Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. What we have received is not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may understand what God has freely given us.
So he says, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what a human mind has conceived. These are the things that God has prepared for us who love him. And yet we've not seen him. And blessed is the person who has not seen and yet believed. And that's why, even though it's hard, God gives us the Holy Spirit to help us. People often ask me, how do you know if something is God's will? Well, it's not easy, but we have a foundation for discerning. 1, the Bible. What does the Word say? 2, the Holy Spirit. What does our prayer reveal? 3, fellowship of wise counsel. What do mature believers say?
And in order to hear it with all 3 of those things, you have to be reading the Bible, you have to be praying, and you have to be in fellowship, which is why Susan encouraged you to find a local church and get involved.
And this is how we discover God's will for our lives. Okay, back to our story. Now that Elijah has the people's attention, he takes control.
Back to 1 Kings chapter 18, starting in verse 40. Then Elijah commanded them, seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees.
Okay, so I love this scene because he's been sassy, he's been non-questioning, obedient, and here's where Elijah's humanity and his faith intersect and kind of like come to a crossroads. God just used Elijah to do this incredible public miracle. You would think that Elijah would be doing a dance himself, but he knows the fickle hearts of people. He knows the biggest miracle is still to come, and he's pretty sure God's going to do it. But God has intel that Elijah doesn't. God's only going to do it if the people really repented, and Elijah can't read their hearts. Will God show mercy and end the drought? Is the rain coming? Well, the angels are on the edge of their seats, the popcorn in their hands suspended in midair, anticipation in their eyes as they wait. Poor Elijah is on his knees, his face to the ground. He cannot look, anxiety in his heart as he waits. Only God can read the hearts of men. Only God knows the end of every story. In my mind, God does not live on the edge of anticipation or anxiety. He's always calm because his plan was and always is on course. God knows the end, and he is certain of the outcome.
Continuing in verse 43, go and look toward the sea, Elijah told his servant, and he went up and looked. There is nothing there, he said. 7 times Elijah said, go back. The 7th time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. So Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel.
Can you imagine what Elijah felt like? He's on his knees in anxiety thinking, oh my gosh, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? And finally he hears after 7 times, the rain is coming. Yet still the man does not celebrate. No dance. Does this man, Elijah, ever celebrate? Elijah is intense. On the Myers-Briggs test, he's probably the protagonist, an ENFJ. On the DISC test, I think he's a D. And on the Enneagram, he might be an 8, the challenger. Because Elijah is not content with turning the hearts of the people or ending the drought and starvation. There is more to do to save Israel. And he is not going to stop to celebrate. He's going straight to the top, to the leader of the idolatry, to King Ahab and his evil queen Jezebel. The angels are on their feet cheering. The popcorn is flying. And Elijah, cloak in his belt, is running faster than humanly possible because the power of the Lord came upon him. Stay tuned for more on Elijah, the power prophet.
What's a club without friends? If you're enjoying the Bible Book Club, why don't you share it? And then you can say, Welcome to the club. New episodes drop every Monday, and get all episodes now on Amazon Music. As always, head over to susanme.com/Bible Book Club for show notes from today's episode. Bible Book Club is hosted by Susan Merrill and Heather Rubio, edited by Buck Buchanan, produced by Haley Mawat.